Thank you for joining XROM, which is India's first AR/VR focused podcast. And today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Sriram, who's the co-founder and CEO of DaveAI, an AI-powered sales augmentation platform that helps brands drive sales with improved and interactive product discovery experiences using a virtual sales avatar that mimics a human sales brain. Earlier, he had been part of companies such as Wipro and HCL, plus InfiSwift, an IoT platform focused on solar energy, and Slurpin.com, an AI-led personalized food subscription platform. So, Sriram, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. We are in this exciting space of time when technologies are converging and we are fast moving from a physical world to online or the digital world. Just maybe around 15 years back or 10 years back, the way we used to shop, work, play, everything used to be completely physical. We used to go to a kirana, buy things, but then this Amazon, the online thing happened, the web 2, and we have completely, if not completely, almost like a huge percentage of what we do, shopping and everything is done online. So now this transition post-COVID has been accelerated, and post the rebranding of Facebook to Meta, from being a social media to a metaverse company, has like really accelerated thing, and there's this huge hype cycle about metaverse. So I think it'll be great if we start with you possibly explaining what metaverse is to the audience.
Thanks, Eddie, first of all, for having me. Glad to be here on your podcast. I don't know, is there a definition for metaverse? So to define, I think there are two key parts to it, right? One is how does physical interactions, what used to happen in the physical world, replicate as close as it can be in virtual worlds, right? It can be anything. It can be industrial, it can be marketing, it can be experience driven. But what is an experience that you would get in the physical world? How close can it get to in the real world? All right. So I think that's one pillar, which is the visual experience, right? And that's where it becomes much more immersive if you have a virtual reality device. But a metaverse is not technically defining. It's not limited to only virtual reality devices. It, of course, gives you a better experience when you're in a virtual reality device. But for, in absolute terms, I don't think it has anything to do with a device or an ecosystem of devices alone. It's just a larger principle of a virtual world, right? The second part of it is, how do customers or users engage in these conversations? So we are a B2B enterprise-driven platform. So, we predominantly, most of my opinions and, understanding might be limited to the, the enterprise and use case specific world, not possibly. So, just wanted to set that context, for people who are listening. So in the second part is our presence. So we're saying that you've been looking at a screen, you've been, consuming content, right? But you're not necessarily creating content or creating experiences as you do this. So when customers are part of an experience that anybody builds, right? Of course, your identity inside a virtual world becomes an avatar. In that case, this avatar can be an avatar that you're controlling, or actually, if you have, devices, wearables that you have, you could actually be mimicking what the avatar does. But you have a presence in this virtual world, right? And that presence is not static, or it's not recorded. It's actually real time, which then makes both of this come together, that there is an interactive virtual world where you can now do stuff much more efficiently, effectively, compared to what happens in the physical world. Now, of course, like you specifically mentioned, there are a convergence of technologies which is coming together, which are Web3 is one of the more important layers that happens here. And then there is probably crypto, right? Which I'm not a specialist on, so I will not talk too much about it, right? I will leave the experts to demystify that part. But at least Web3 allows users to have much more control on the data that they own and share, right? As I leave it to that, to simplify it. But that's just an enabler, right? As how 5G could be an enabler, right? Web3 would be an enabling layer, but an existence of metaverse would not necessarily be dependent on that. Today, of course, that technology is evolving, so you can leverage that, but nobody will define that. No, you cannot call it a metaverse because it's not Web3. It's not on a Web3 ecosystem, right? That's my take on it. It's absolutely not, not the industry standard there. But yes, it is going to be enabled through a convergence of technologies. But according to me, this will be a simple way in which I will define what a metaverse is.
Sriram, thank you for explaining it so beautifully. And so you mentioned the first layer is the experience layer, the experiential layer. It enables that, and also enables presence. That because no matter what, with a 2D medium, it kind of restricts us. We know that you're it's broken the barrier or boundary and geography, and it can make us interact in a second. But we still know that you are behind that 2D this thing with maybe the metaverse, with us wearing maybe head wearable devices, or even through your phones. Possibly you'll be able to experience like an hologram image right next to you, and that will enable presence and the convergence you said of technologies, the Web3, the AI, the IoTs and everything. So yes, exciting space. Now again, since you mentioned that you B2B enterprise is your zone. So would you be able to kind of elaborate on this physical to online transition, that we are on? What are the use cases that you think are going to be prominently that will open up in the next few years when it comes to the metaverse and this physical to online transition?
I think first of all, the physical to digital transition, right? It's an evolution that we've been on, right? And I think the evolution, virtual reality is not new, right? So it's been around for quite some time. Of course, everything has to come together, right? Every user today has, like we said, we are all on hundreds of Mbps worth internet speeds. Which was not the case. A decade back, it was much slower. A decade back, it was, just getting online itself used to be a task, right? And I remember when we were in school, there was this concept of saying that you could actually have a call and then see the person wherever they are. That used to be like a fantasy world, right? But today we are consuming, video calls like, it's just part and parcel of what we do. There is no vanity to it. So I think in the technology evolution, of course, has to be supported, by an entire ecosystem coming together, right? That has to do with software, has to do with regulations, has to do with hardware, has to do with consumers being ready and, aware about consuming that and are able to use it effectively. So there is no questioning. I think nobody would question this fact that we are moving more digital. The world is becoming a much smaller place, and it is for the good because you are able to now connect across geographies, across functions, to people, whoever you want to, which is also transforming, industry segments like never before, right? I'll talk about a couple of examples as we move forward, but specific to your further question on the use cases, right? I think we can sort of face into that. There are, for us, I think when we look at it as three key use cases, right? One is the most popular, which is the gamified world, right? It is, games have always been 3D. It is a new generation of customers who are predominantly gamers, and they consume this content much more effectively than anybody else. We call it Gen Z or whatever we want to, but it's people who are digital natives, I would say, in whatever generation they are in. Now, brands are leveraging this gamified experiences to create affinity with customers, right? That's what people are doing, and through that, there are use cases created. We'll get to that later, but predominantly it's a gamified world where you can gamify a discovery experience, right? It's like going into a mall. You go into a mall because not just because the store is there, but you get that entire experience, right? So that's what a lot of people are doing, and the success of Roblox in some sense is a great validation that there is clear adoption and space there. It can be game companies building these experiences and having tons of users, social media companies creating these experiences, or brands creating these experiences, right? So that's one part. The second part is sales and marketing, right? When it comes to sales and marketing, product launches, selling your products for complex segments, or at least visually compelling products. So these are virtual experiences. So we worked with Maruti Suzuki in creating Metaverse, which is a virtual showroom experience where customers can come and create cars. So which means that if my dad wants to buy a car tomorrow, we don't have to travel to each other's location, to either of our locations. He can be in his virtual showroom. I can join him in that experience, and we can have a conversation about the car, check out the car in different configurations. All of this happens, and then you make a purchase decision, right? A simple example of that, right? You can think about it for a bank. It could be a virtual branch, and so on and so forth, right? So sales experiences, sales and marketing driven experiences, also product launches, events, right? An extension of that. That's an entirely different space, virtual events. I'm not talking about it, but sales and marketing as an overall concept is a big pillar. And a rapidly adopting space is industrial metaverse, where you're able to collaborate and design and do all of that in a collaborative experience, which I think there are tons of players. We are not in that space, but there are a lot of players, really picking that up. Much earlier, 5-6 years back, the Google Glass, right? The Google X, I think they called it, was there's no VR there. It's augmented reality, but then you could wear your Google Glass and then in a factory, and it is a digital experience. It's a collaborative experience. Somebody in a different geography can give you commands while you are looking at the machine and actually operating, right? Aircraft design, so on and so forth. There are various use cases where in industrial metaverse side. So these are three distinct pillars. Of course, there are fringe use cases, but I think these are three distinct pillars where we see significant adoption, and we fall in the middle part, which is sales and marketing. That's where we help brands allow their customers to discover these products better, in virtual worlds. That's our play in this whole
exciting things happening. So you mentioned about this convergence, which is, the transition from the physical to the digital transition. There are the traditionalists who are playing a wait and watch game, and there are the front movers such as yourself and others who understand, who have a foresight and are moving towards that direction. Though there is, there's a lot of apprehension, because I think forever we have held back the thought that like through history. I think we were like, when the TV first came in, we used to tell our kids like, oh, you watch too much TV and it's going to be bad for your eyes. And then the computer happened, the same thing, but I think we need to understand this natural course of evolution, and the kids, the Gen Z that you spoke about, they are digital natives. My son, 7-year-old boy, I grew up watching TV where I used to get up, there was no remote, I used to go turn the knob, and put it on, and then came the remote, but today, when how he engages with TV is completely different. He speaks to Alexa, he says, Alexa, I want to watch this, Alexa, so for these digital natives, and what I'm trying to say is that the consumers have already or are transitioning and moving on to the digital world. And the brands, enterprise have to be where the consumers are. So I think more and more brands and enterprise needs to be cognizant about that physical to transition move, and figure out the strategy so they are better prepared for the future. Now, you are the founder of DaveAI. Would you like to talk about DaveAI and the products that you guys are building?
Yeah, maybe very briefly. I don't want to make this what do you call it, sales pitch in some sense. But so I'll talk about the context of the space that we're talking about, right? So we believe in the hypothesis. We have three fundamental pillars that we are betting on in some sense, right? In terms of what the future is going to be. We spoke about it briefly previously, but I'll just touch upon that, which is this transition from 2D to 3D. Right, that's the foundational pillar that we believe. A classic example, as simple as it is, Amazon having 3D views of all products today, most products, right? It's very simple, straightforward, but it allows you to have a better experience of that product. Now, of course, in a car, we have a use case like in Maruti Suzuki, the same one I'm talking about again. But today, a dealer sales executive is going into a tier 3 location where there's no showroom, but he's able to carry a virtual reality device with him and go and show all the 13 cars or 8 cars or 6 cars that are available in that particular channel through a virtual reality device. And the person is wearing it in a small, mobile store and thinking what is the right choice to make. Right. And then deciding, okay, I want, and then do I have to visually see the car? And they don't need to because they have seen and experienced the car with a friend, but they're able to get that sales experience at the comfort of their place, right? So this 2D to 3D is one key pillar. The second part is, like I said, the virtual avatars, right? So we started with the work on virtual avatars in 2020, but our work is predominantly on the brand side to say, okay, there are these tons of companies who will come and enable you create avatars, including Meta and Real Player Me and so on and so forth. You will have avatars that we believe companies will have to open them up. You will own your avatar, right? You would not want to create an avatar for Meta, an avatar for Google, and an avatar you will have one virtual presence wherever you create it. And we believe there will become a time where you will be able to cross leverage that across all experiences. At least one of the players will have to open that up, like you sign in with your Google account today in most of the accounts, right? Something like that would happen, but brands will have their representatives. Right. So, and these representatives cannot just be dumb avatars that look like you, right? In most cases, our research suggests that you would never want an avatar to look like you, right? While that's a common trend, can this avatar look like me? But if I had an option to create an avatar, I would create a much better looking, more stylish avatar than a replica of me because I've lived this life. Right. Mostly I would want a fantasy avatar in my virtual world. Right. That's just a part of it. But brands will have their representatives, and we will be predominant first interactions between users and brands would be through these avatars. And finally, it's going to be speech. You took a classic example of your son, talking to your television. And I think that's the future, right? There is going to be no user experience, right? Nobody would want to fiddle around a UI, think about what this button will do. People coming with UI frameworks. I think it will be there in some sense because it has to be there. But eventually people will interact with devices through speech and voice. And the technology is already there. We are using it on Maps. We're using it with Alexa, Google Home, and all of that. And I think that's fairly evolved. So we've tried to bring all these three together, betting on this evolution that's happening, and then saying that every brand will have an immersive experience in the next decade, right? That's our bet. Today, some people are taking a back seat. There are adopters, early adopters, laggards, but every large enterprise who's going to sell to end consumers will need to have an immersive experience, right? It's like having that online store or a physical store. They would want to allow customers to experience. It's an ecosystem, it will evolve, but we believe it will be there. And we want to enable these brands to create these experiences. Right? That's what we are looking at.
Right. Yeah. So you rightfully pointed out, I think brands need to understand that eventually, I think all of these brands will need to have some kind of its existence on the metaverse platform, because the transition is already happening. It's the customers are already moving onto the digital world. You mentioned about these AI avatars, this digital identity, and you said that why would you want to have your digital identity, the same visual appeal or same visual appearance such as yourself. talk to me a little bit more about that, because there's lots of pros and cons, when you're talking about digital identity. Right now at this point of time, none of the avatars, Ready Player Me, I have any kind of AI integration onto it. But DaveAI is working on AI integration onto these avatars.
Right.
First of all, maybe just talk about the business use cases. What would be the business use cases? How could businesses integrate these intelligent avatars? How would they engage with the customers? And maybe paint a picture of maybe like further down, when you have these convergence of technologies that we spoke about, with these IoTs, where all the physical world is being, have got scanners and these, in fact, even possibly with the healthcare, maybe we will have these digital avatars where all of our biomarkers are being read, and these digital twins. So maybe paint a picture of what could be the maybe no-goes in the future that maybe we need to avoid, because currently our social media is a way to create a lot of problems, because the anonymous identity of yourself, and you can do what you want and stuff like that. So what are the no-goes that you see? What are the problem areas you see, when you have these AI digital smart avatars?
We believe intelligence is important because we cannot, like, mundane tasks are anyways being automated, right? So I have a product and I have somebody to explain that product to somebody, as simple as probably doing a quick demo, right? Today we have demo videos, right? In some sense, demo videos are also replacing people because people are coming and checking out that videos, right? Today we are going to do this, and let's assume that this is our core business, but if you record and put it out there, and there are people multiple watching it, instead of us doing tons of episodes to different people. So anyways, as an evolutionary change, mundane tasks will be taken over by automation, intelligence, etc., and people will have to upskill themselves to do better jobs, right? But so when I come to a website, as simple as a use case, and I'm looking at content, right? What if somebody can explain that to me, right? And today I have large brand has millions of customers coming into their platform, on their digital platforms every month, and can an avatar, explain that product or service to the customer, or represent the brand in this virtual world, right? It is a virtual world eventually. So you would want a representative in that space, right? You cannot now hire a bunch of people and say, whenever somebody comes, why don't you wear a VR device and greet them, right? How do you qualify? What qualified conversations you? So we believe that brands will have their digital representatives in these spaces, but they cannot put dumb representatives on these spaces. They cannot just put good-looking representatives on the spaces. All that is important, but it has to represent the brand's product, services, their ethos, all of that. So we need to have an AI sales brain. We are in the sales world, so we help companies generate more revenues through these avenues, and hence we help train these avatars to sell. Right? When do I nudge? When do I motivate the customer to do something more? So those are the things that we are working on. It's an online learning genetic algorithm in the backend that's trying to understand who the customer is, contextualize the conversation, and try and move the customer ahead. So it's a clear revenue-driven use case in our scenario. But there are going to be other important use cases like healthcare, education, right? And that provides access, right? So accessibility to a larger population, where not in the developed countries, but in the developing economies or in the underdeveloped economies, right? When these avatars are good enough to have the first set of conversations, do first cut diagnosis with a certain set of rules, right? Which are going to be fairly accurate. And whenever you're not right, even today, no AI bot gets everything right every time, right? General purpose AIs are there. They're good, but it's not like we get it right all the time. And at that point, I can actually rely on human intelligence. But if you're able to then expose that, then this actually is for the larger good, right? Because accessibility is a big issue. And it is because, know-how is limited with a certain set of people, right? Once you can democratize it, and avatars create a digital human form factor there. And if it is backed by an AI brain, the applications are immense, right? We are doing a very specific business use case But the moment you get into education or to healthcare, etc., then you can imagine what real impact it can cause to everybody, right? But of course, the technology has to evolve. Healthcare today, you have bots, that do for use cases like mental health, right? People would be more open to talking to bots because as long as the bot is able to fairly empathize and then get help and then come back, because you don't want to share this with an actual person, right? So avatars have their own advantages. The no-goes, there are risks with systems like deep fake coming up, right? Deep fake is also has a strong business use case, like what a lot of brands have done, but it also has the other side of it, where it can be leveraged for creating content that is and then assimilated in social media, for whatever gains that a specific group of individuals would want, and so on and so forth. So even if as a large personality or a leader would not have said something, it's very easy to manufacture content and propagate, and then it's about the regulatory authorities to pin that down. So technology has that alter side to it, especially in the avatar sort of use case. Those are not avatars, I would say. Those are just recordings, and then deepfake pushed into it. In some sense, they become digital identities. So that's the place where we have not ventured into, especially because of this risk, right? Because when we push the envelope in technology there, then that technology can be leveraged for something bad. So how do we sort of restrict that is how we've looked at it. Yeah. So that's my quick take on the 2 points that you spoke about.
Right. You mentioned about AI which could empathize, and that's such a cool thing. So far, I mean, the AI, we're in a narrow space, and you mentioned about artificial general intelligence, we're a little far away from that. But yes, there are so many people groups and researchers around the world who are working on AGI. You have a patent pending empathetic AI technology. Would you like to talk about that, and maybe what could be the applications that you're looking at, once you...
Yeah. See, what we wanted to specifically look at is to understand the context of a conversation in relevance to the business that the user is interacting in, right? So, for example, if you're walking to a car showroom, right, I have to empathize in a certain boundary of stuff. Of course, I need some general intelligence, right, to understand, probably the emotions of customers in types of words they use and questions they use, etc., and not to offend the customer by telling something that the bot might say, which is not relevant to that particular situation. There is, again, within empathetic AI, there is the general empathy. But because we are trying to work with a very narrow space, and that's the way to solve, we will need people like different teams work on different specific use cases. And of course, larger groups like Google and, OpenAI and all of that, where they are trying to do work which is at scale, right? Both of this come together to sort of then deliver a great experience. So we're trying to limit ourselves to product discovery, sales and marketing as a use case. So it's more about discovering products that a brand sells. So we sort of converge that extremely narrow focus for us when it comes to empathetic AI. And the empathy is in the context of a sales conversation, right? So can I get as good as your best salesperson? Who I've interacted myself with a bunch of people where it's just that interaction that convinces you to engage with that product or brand, right? Because they're able to really articulate it, and they're able to articulate the value proposition specific to your use case. And most often than not, you miss engaging or purchasing or experiencing great products because you had a bad experience with an individual who's representing that brand. It's a very not so focused parameter when it comes to technology, right? We just put a bot out there, but the idea is to try and see what has worked for you, and how is it changing now, right? With AI. So that's the empathy that we are specifically talking about. And the patent pending part is what happens is that during this conversation in real time, so even in this conversation, right, I'm saying something, and then that you're resonating with that. And we are talking about a very narrow topic, right? And your podcast itself is focused on a very narrow topic. But even within that, you're able to navigate this conversation based on my inputs and relevance to my context, our business's context, etc. And the same is happening when I'm talking back to you. So that level of empathy, at least we should get to start with, right? And then we sort of move forward in our case, right? But yes, the technology itself, the fundamental layer that we are building, at some point it can actually be leveraged for other use cases. And we hope that we'll be able to work with other partners. We're trying to push the envelope in terms of research. We do have R&D consortiums with academia. We work with KTH Stockholm, where one of my co-founders did his PhD from. We work with IIT Guwahati, IIIT Hyderabad. So there are a bunch of good academic research work that's happening. We're also trying to engage with them so that we're able to also bring that in real life use cases a bit more faster and apply this intelligence in real world use cases.
Yeah, congratulations. And I think that's the way to go, because I think the most of the cutting edge of research and innovation is happening in academia, and you can, and the brightest mind who are agile, nimble, frugal, and can like really go out and get things done are the entrepreneurs, and that combination is so deadly, and I think collaboration is the key for every entrepreneur who's kind of listening. So tell me, I mean, for those entrepreneurs, the startup community who are listening and who would want to get into building like a metaverse AI solution, what would be your advice? Because even the AI training cost is declining rapidly. So how do you think that's going to impact the industry, and some advice to entrepreneurs who want to get into this?
Yeah, so entrepreneurs generally hate advice, so I should stay away from that because sometimes what happens is general advice always has to be contextual, right? It sometimes works for you or against you, because my experience might will actually, I'll be biased by my experience, and I strongly believe the new folks are extremely talented, and they have a much wider worldview than some of us have. But yeah, predominantly I believe the ecosystem today is far open and far developed compared to what it was even 4 years back or 3 years back, right? The infrastructure costs, availability of infrastructure, and access to information, right? And especially deep tech as an ecosystem. I think we had in NASSCOM Deep Tech Club, which we are part of, is a premier deep tech club in the country. We had very limited startups when we started off with, but today there are even the number of applications applying to the program has increased significantly. So I think the only advice is to sort of look at it as a contribution to the larger ecosystem, and not be too closed in what you're building, right? Today, we come across a lot of organizations where we talk to them and they're like, no, this cannot coexist with what you're building, because we could be in competing spaces, right? But I believe that we are probably not even scratching the surface today, right? And as entrepreneurs, generally, that sort of limits, it is because of various pressures that the entrepreneur might come across, that they tend to build something and sort of protect that too much. It becomes, interoperability becomes a challenge. And today, as a platform, we even are going and talking to enterprises who build their own metaverses with probably somebody else and figuring out ways to coexist, right? Because we believe that only when it becomes an ecosystem is when this will move forward. So the only advice is not technology advice, probably a business approach, not an advice, but a take that I have is, and we as an organization have in terms of how we build our tech itself, is that, today, for example, somebody wants to build a metaverse and they come to us, right? How many experiences can we conceptualize? How many games can we develop, right? At what pace? So unless I'm open and allow creators to come in and create on top of a platform, let them use it, contribute to our code base, to the experience that we're building. And I think that's the secret sauce, if you want to open up, right? It can't be closed as an innovation. It has to be open, so that then is when the real power of this, sort of gets picked up.
together there is so much we can do. Innovation could be accelerated, and that was plain to see with COVID. With COVID, what happened normally, when you create a vaccine, it's a process of like 4 to 8 years, from the creation to reaching the market, but we managed to do it in 6 months because of global collaboration. And just imagine what innovations we could see if we all kind of figured a way to work together. Would you like to talk about the cutting edge of innovation that's caught your attention in the space of metaverse and AI?
Yeah. So see, metaverse itself, I think people have implemented it well. Nike Land, for example, is a classic use case, right? The cutting edge there, I believe, is not just about the tech, right? I think tech is something we get. There is so much there is so much know-how and resources available today, right? People are smart, right? It's the use case that we don't get right, or the use case or the application of it is what we generally don't get right. And I think execution is I think cutting innovation, I think, is largely also in the space of, what do you call it, how it's executed, right? How an idea is executed. So we were pretty amazed with the adoption that Nike has done, and in what they've done, achieved with it. And I think they got the entire piece right with being in the right space. They, of course, used an open another ecosystem where it was launched, but they also had the right partner who they acquired, created digital assets, also backed it up with physical assets, right? So the cool digital play there, and it all came together, right? And I think that execution really, is something that we try and replicate, right? Because it cannot be just to say that, there is this whole monkey picture joke that goes around, but, it cannot be a digital asset for the sake of a digital asset, right? It cannot be an NFT for the sake of an NFT. It cannot be a smart contract for something that, if you look at it, it has to make sense, right? It has to just make sense. Now, it need not make sense for everybody, right? Now, will you buy a digital sneaker? That may not be common sense for everybody, but you're going to talk to your 7-year-old. He may resonate with that, right? I was talking to my co-founder. His son is also about 10 years old. And, he was talking about a birthday party where all of these folks came and they spent the day, playing games and discussing, how cool their avatar is in that game, what they're doing, etc. So they would want to accessorize their avatar in that space, right? It makes sense for them, right? So it has to make sense for the target audience. Right? It cannot, but what has happened is, because that happened, then everybody were talking about this, and that became a huge fad. And then, of course, it crashed. And then, but people who have done it well are still continuing to do it. So I think it's about that execution that we try to learn from, and not about how cool your space is. And because we are not the only ones who can build it, right? There is tons of anybody who wants to put their mind and effort to it and have the technology capability can build something. So I would like to sort of focus on that part. And I think how Web3 as a core tech, right? I think we believe that there are multiple players. So I don't want to talk about just one layer, but I think the power that tomorrow consumers will have. So, for example, today I'm going and leaving my mobile number, for example, on a platform. What happens to that data, right? An irrelevant person gets that information. Forget about me being on D&D or not being on D&D. My information is somehow compromised there, right? As a very basic, very simple use case that everybody gets. Now, what if I have control to that, right? What if I'm entering into a smart contract with you as a brand when I'm sharing my details? I think that's what is exciting for us in this space as we move forward, where we're going to, if it gets decentralized and if you're able to give the power to the consumer, then brands are going to, respect you, of course. And as consumers, you have, the decision making of where you want to be, what you want to share, what you want to experience. I think this convergence is what is very exciting for us.
Right, a completely exciting space for the brands, but I think extremely exciting space for the consumers, because so far consumers have been, or the data has been hoarded, manipulated, and so on and so forth. But I guess, going forward, if the if we actually get into a world which is decentralized and interoperable that we are all talking about, I think it's going to be a huge game changer. I don't even know if the big brands, the big tech companies are even ready for decentralization or interoperability. How that kind pans out is a big question. Through the course of conversation, you mentioned about building the Maruti Suzuki Metaverse platform, Nexaverse, and you have also built out a virtual bank for Karnataka, Tira. Could you talk about these two use cases and what have been the benefits for them?
So yes, absolutely exciting. In fact, Karnataka Bank, Dira, was one of the first virtual avatars, in the banking space as a digital human that was deployed on a digital kiosk. The idea was a digital bank where you could go in and this becomes a concierge where you can interact with Dira and conduct all your banking services. And this use case, we also then launched the avatar Maruti's virtual assistant on Maruti's web pages. So these avatars existed even before this whole buzz of Metaverse, right? And we saw use cases. It was not because of any fad or anything like that. We really saw value delivered to these brands in sheer number of cars sold, number of loan applications processed, and so on and so forth. So we were able to make clear differences there. And of course, Maruti Suzuki was an early adopter. They had a great use case where they had to sell a car which was still not available in all physical showrooms, which is the Grand Vitara. We launched the Grand Vitara in the Nexaverse, which is Maruti Suzuki's initiative, which started off in the Metaverse with Nexaverse. Now we are sort of expanding that use case to various other channels, etc. And we are seeing significant, adoption to that platform. It's now available in all showrooms. So you can go into a showroom as well and then get teleported into an experience what you cannot experience in the showroom, or cars that are not available in the showroom can be taken care. But also in the comfort of your home, you can do that. You will be able to do joint, showroom visits, like I spoke about, right? When you're in two different geographies. So these are clear use cases, and this is about virtual product discovery. So we believe with less number of people walking into physical stores and physical spaces, virtual stores, virtual branches, virtual spaces will become inevitable, right? They have to exist because customers would demand that I would want to go and check out your product in a bit more. Sirf itna hi hai website mein jo image dikh raha hai, or should I go and ask for something more, right? Do you have something else? Can I have a more interactive experience? I think customers are going to ask for it. They already are engaging with this, but they will ask for it soon. It will become the norm, right? So you will need it. So that's how it's going to be. And these are the two use cases. We are doing a couple of more implementations, which will be live in December, which is for a large private sector bank, one of the largest oil and gas players in the country. So yeah, we believe that we are enabling enterprises to join this bandwagon without having to worry about regulatory compliances, sharing data, etc. Whatever that enterprise wants, have complete control on this, and we are able to deploy flexibly, allow them to deploy wherever they want to, but still share their experiences with the world and also share it with other customers. So we are trying to become we are today a more enterprise-friendly Metaverse platform, if I may call it so, and also trying to get them, limit the barriers to entry that an enterprise has. Because it's easy for a consumer brand to onboard, but it's very difficult for a large corporate brand to onboard, right? Because of policies, regulations, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to enable that for these institutions.
Lovely. Sriram, really appreciate you taking time, being part of the podcast, sharing your insights. And yeah, it's an exciting space. You guys are doing a great thing. My last question, for those enterprise who are playing a wait and watch game, what would you tell them, and what would be like the advice, like baby steps that they should take to be future ready?
Yeah, I think there will be use cases for every enterprise where this makes sense, right? For sure, you should wait and watch if you don't have a right use case, right? Or your customers, you don't think your customers are suited for this. But every enterprise, I think today, needs to be relevant to the next generation of customers. That's my simple thing, right? My daughter would not have affinity to a car manufacturer or a banking service provider or an apparel brand, which would not be present in the world that she's going to be present in, or like your son, right? They are going to have affinity to brands that they will relate to, and at least to create that relatability, you will need to be in this platform, right? That's a classic use case that every consumer-facing enterprise can think about, and that's a great starting point as well. If you're still waiting and watching and figuring out what that is, they may not be purchases today, but you will create, an affinity with the next generation of customers that are going to be largely spending digitally, and also not be too worried about savings in retirement, etc. They're going to be splurging also. So that's the generation that you can start targeting, right? And that would probably cut off this wait and watch game, because you will find a use case for them.
Lovely. Sriram, really appreciate you taking time, being part of the podcast. Wish you and your team the very best. And I think the notes, whatever you said last, are profound. I'm going to leave it to there. And I hope the listeners, the enterprise, take in and act. So thank you for being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sriram. Really appreciate this.